All right, we are live. This is episode 38 of the PHU Dynasty podcast. We have officially entered the playoff push, and I'm here with my friend and very esteemed colleague, Justin Sr. And I want to just say quickly the first place Baton Rouge Bombers clinching a playoff spot already in the season, 10-2, just absolutely lighting it up this year. Justin, how you doing?
I'm feeling good, and I appreciate you having me on tonight. It sounds nice to hear those words. We've never heard them before in this Dynasty League, so
I can't
it's
say I've heard it.
it's a new territory for the Bombers faithful, and I'm fortunate to share the company of one of the longest standing fans and foremost scholars on Bombers tradition, and that's yourself. So I'm happy to be
Yeah.
here.
I mean, if there could be a super fan for the Bombers, I feel like it would be me.
I
I,
agree.
I have money on the Bombers, so this isn't any sort of collusion. This podcast, this is simply me just admiring the Bombers' work over the last decade or so in this league, and we're excited to talk. We'll get more into the Bombers later, but let's quickly go over what we're gonna do today in the podcast. Today we're gonna do. It's been a few weeks, so we're gonna go over some of the trades that happened recently. We'll kind of do a rundown of the standings as they stand, no pun intended, right now, and then we'll talk about the playoff push a little bit, since we only have a few weeks left, and then we'll close it out with a state of the union for the Bombers, since he's in a position that's in uncharted territories for the Bombers faithfuls. Well, I'm sure they all want to hear about it. So let's go ahead and get started with some of these recent trades. And there's been some real doozies, Justin. There's been some
There have been,
unexpected
yeah,
trades.
there have
So
been, yeah. I love to see some trading by Alex. It's just some of my favorite material that we see over the year, and there's no shortage of it.
yeah, I mean, it seems like he just gets bored on a week-to-week basis. I think a lot of times what ends up happening is he'll just go for a good old tinker stinker, and he'll get on the he'll get on the toilet and just start making trades. I think that's what happens, right?
Someone's
I
got to
mean,
do it, and
I mean this one
sometimes it works.
this one's interesting by itself because it involves the one.
Najee Harris.
It's got Najee, and everybody loves Najee Harris. And now that he's back on the team, I can use that drop infinitely more than I could before.
Yes.
So this is exciting. The Muskrats acquired Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, and Elijah Moore from the newly rebuilding Elk in return for Brees Hall, Michael Pittman, and Jerry Jeudy. Justin, what were your initial thoughts on this trade? Did you feel like one side really won this deal, or did you think it was kind of even?
I think it's pretty close to even, but I have to say I like it for the Elk a little more. I think Brees Hall is just the most valuable asset of the six of them, of the bunch. I like Najee Harris a lot, but the Steelers look terrible, and he's underwhelming this year. Tony Pollard is having flashes of brilliance, but who knows how long he's going to be in whatever the weird split he's in with Zeke. And he's got 31 week and 5 the next week, and Elijah Moore is down this year. But I think Jerry Jeudy is a good buy low right now. I like that. I like Michael Pittman, who's down this year from last year. I think it's a good buy low opportunity for the Elk, and then they get the blue chip piece. I think in Brees Hall. I think Brees Hall is kind of the steal of this trade, personally.
Yeah, I think when you look at these type of trades when they're involving such big pieces, it kind of is who is the true blue chip, and I think out of these guys, Brees Hall definitely is. I mean, he's only going to be 22 next year. He should be healthy by the beginning of the season. The Elk clearly are in the rebuild phase, and frankly, this is outside of getting draft picks, which at this point the Elk really can't get the draft picks because Tibbs and I hold most of them, and the other people that have them, like yourself and Vince,
Vince, yeah.
aren't really willing to move off of them. So in order to get younger and get better, this might really be the only option for the Elk. And like you said, Pittman and Jeudy are both kind of buy low, younger pieces that have many opportunities probably in the future to improve on their stock. Whereas I think Najee Harris, I think he's been decent with what's going on around him, but at the same time, I think let's look at his stats here. He's RB21 right now, averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Only has 4 touchdowns in the year.
It's
I,
not
I
good.
don't see that situation improving that much from a 2 to 3 year window. I mean, really, it all revolves around Pickett and the offense, and
Sure.
I'm just not quite seeing it yet. So I don't feel great about it for the Muskrats, but at the same time, he is a blue chip player, in Dynasty, and the carries mean something.
Sure.
So I do think it was a decent deal for the Muskrats, because I also like Elijah Moore as a buy low. Right now with the Zach Wilson experience coming to a close, maybe this is finally when Elijah Moore starts picking it up a little bit. But he was a great prospect coming out. I think a lot of people really liked Elijah Moore, so he could easily return nice value.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and I think it's just two teams going for two different things. I know Najee's having a down year, but these are players like Najee Harris and Tony Pollard that Alex can plug in if he's trying to win this year, which obviously we know he is. Whereas, like you mentioned, for the Elk, Breece Hall is a next year player and a future player, and he's very young, and we've already seen that he can be very good. And Pittman and Jeudy are buy lows, so I think it's a good future move for the Elk, and I think it's a somewhat high risk now move for the Muskrats.
And Tony Pollard is a free agent after this year, so he'll be a 26-year-old free agent as well. So he'll be in interesting territory after the close of this season too. Right. So let's go ahead and move on to the next trade. This also involves the Muskrats, and he quickly moved on from Tony Pollard and then acquired Tyler Lockett, A.J. Dillon, and a 25 fifth from the Los Angeles Lambs. I thought this was an interesting deal because it just really, this deal hinges to me on A.J. Dillon, because he, heading into the year, was kind of a dynasty darling, even a redraft. I think he went in the top 7 to 6 rounds in most redraft leagues.
Yeah.
Literally did nothing this year. I had drafted him in redraft. He has completely screwed me. He's done nothing. So if you would have showed this trade to me earlier in the year, I would have been like, oh my God, this is an absolute swindling. But as it stands right now, Lockett is a decent win now piece for the Muskrats, and then A.J. Dillon is kind of that swing for the fence, hope he comes back to life. But Tony Pollard, right now he's getting that 50-50 split kind of deal with Zeke, but he's playing out of his mind. So the Lambs get somebody that has some future upside. He's only, like I said, 26 free agent next year, but for the Lambs trying to win now and needing a running back, it makes sense, right?
It does, yeah, and he is. Every time it seems, because then I have Zeke, and if I can't watch the Cowboys game, which why would I want to do that? I'm following it on my phone, and I'm like, every time Tony Pollard touches the ball, it's a 30-yard touchdown reception, 60-yard touchdown reception, 27-yard run, whatever, and I just have to hope for like a 6-yard Zeke touchdown suck out, because Tony Pollard really is producing better than Zeke is right now. And so, yeah, I agree for James and for the Lambs, it's a good pickup, for the remainder of this season to try to make that playoff push and win. But, I frankly could say the same about the Muskrats, because after those trades, the Muskrats were very wide receiver needy. And I think Alex realized that and said, we got to make a change here, flip one of these running backs for a receiver who can help produce now to even out the team a little bit. And I think as far as value goes, I think it's good value for Alex. I think, like you said, A.J. Dillon is down this year, but in the beginning of the year, not everybody, but a lot of people were high on him, and he was drafted, pretty highly. And, Alex gets a 4th, which is nice, and he gets, a producing player in Tyler Lockett who's going to be reliable and dependable. So, I really like it for both teams, frankly.
Yeah, I think each team got what they needed out of this deal. And Tony Pollard, just looking at some quick stats, he's averaging 5.6 yards per carry. He has 6 touchdowns on the ground, and he has 2 from the air. I mean, he's RB8 in standard leagues, which if you told most people that at the beginning of the year, they would have been totally off of that idea. He was RB29 last year, so he's totally improved. But we'll have to see what happens next year with where he'll actually be playing. It could be with the Cowboys, but I feel like they've invested so much in Zeke, they might not have that opportunity. And it's a great draft to pick up another running back. So sure. Let's get to our next trade, and that is a much lower one on the scale of importance, but not really. So I have an interesting note on this. So the Elk trade Samaje Perine to the Battle Axis for a 4th round pick in 2023. And without this trade, the Battle Axes do not win this week. This week they played the Lampposts, and the Battle Axes won by 8. And Samaje Perine had 15, I believe. So I think he was the difference maker. So Scavelli essentially bought a win for a 4th round pick. And right now Scavelli's team has locked in a playoff berth at 8-4. So frankly, you could say That's an
That's just
important trade.
vintage Scavelli to buy a win like that. It's great timing, great value on buying some Ajay Pirine. I don't know if he's gonna, I think Joe Mixon's coming back real soon, and Scavelli's no fan of draft picks anyway, so I think it's a well spent fourth, really.
It might be one of the most well spent fourths I've ever seen for a win now team. And frankly, that fourth could easily be Dez Fitzpatrick or some shithead in the draft. I mean, it's literally the fourth round picks end up being a bunch of schlubs most of the time. So
some Ajay Pirine.
So get your win and get the hell out of there. And the same Ajay Pirine, if I believe was it Joe Mixon had a concussion too, so that could be a lingering thing. This he could buy 2 wins out of this.
That's true. We'll see.
We'll have to see. Scavelli has locked in a playoff berth as well. So, right now that looks like a great trade. So with that, let's get into the standings. We're going to kind of go over each team a little bit here and talk about some of the recent events with each team. I'm actually going to skip over your team for now because we're going to do the State of the Union later. So the first place Bombers, they did win against the Lambs last week in a pretty spirited battle, I'll say, at 151 to 129. So they have won, picking up off of their loss the week before. But let's move quickly ahead to the Lampposts. So the Lampposts are at second place right now. They dropped their last game against the Battle Axes, like I mentioned, to basically Samaje Perine, and now they're at 9-3. They have scored the most points in the league at this point at 1763. Yeah. And that is, I believe, they're 100 above the next closest. So they're pretty dominantly one of the best teams, I would say.
Yeah, I agree.
And this week, I believe he has a matchup against, please hold one second, a freebie, if you will, against the Cheese Fries. So I'm expecting a win there. But for
those Cheese Fries can put up some points sometimes.
You never know. You might. If they not this last week, they only had 79 this last week. So, but it just depends which week you get them. Do you believe at this point, your team is obviously a 10-2. Do you believe you're a better team than the Bombers right now, but than the Lampposts right now?
The Bombers know where they came from. The Bombers don't believe they're better than anybody in this league, and that's one of the great things about the parity of this league. I think we have the great stat of the max points for in Sleeper that they give us, and it's no surprise that Dan is first in that as well. So it's not even up to manager error or greatness or whatever. It's he has the most max points for, he has the most max points scored. I think it's clear that he has the most dangerous team. Certainly, everybody's team can put up some stinkers. Every once in a while. Dan's been fairly consistent. He's had some very high scoring games. So I do think he's the best team. I don't think he has a ton, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't think he has much draft capital at all.
Not much, no.
I think he has like a couple fourths or something like that. So, who knows how that affects him going forward, but he's got a really strong team, and I think he's the best in the league. And I think, that's, like I said, I mentioned the parity about this league. I don't think the Bombers, I think the Bombers are competitive, but I don't think, frankly, they're any better than the Lambs or the Battle Axes or the Muskrats even, for purposes of the remainder of this year, because we look at the points scored, and you're right, like Dan's up by 100, Scavelli's in second, 100 behind him, and I'm 15, 20 behind Scavelli. But then, the delta of points that people are away from each other is not big. And I think it's more important to look at the max points for to see what the team's true power is, on any given week to week. And I looked at that just the other day, actually just this morning, I think. And I think Dan is in first, like I said, with 60 points more than James, who is in sixth, which is over 12 weeks of football.
Pretty wild.
Being 60 points, that's 5 points a week over 12 weeks. So, truly, if everybody's on their best game, which obviously doesn't happen every week in terms of who you're going to start and sit or whatever, 60 points across 6 teams is really not a lot, which means it's anybody's game, any game of the week. So I think the Bombers have been fortunate with scheduling. I know that, we've had some narrow victories this year. I remember earlier in the season, we beat the Elk when we scored, I think, 90, 91. And then a week or two later, we beat the Cheese Fries with 103. So we've caught some good breaks on some bad weeks, but the good teams have to gut out those wins and have to make it happen. So I've been lucky with scheduling, I think. And I think without, having the luck of scheduling, I'm right there in the muck with Alex and James and in Scavelli. So, I think Dan's the clear one, but the five of us right behind him for the purposes of the remainder of this year are really close.
Yeah, I think that top five or so are truly definitively those top five, and like you mentioned, there's not a lot of differentiating characteristics in the points. So I think pretty much this next team as well. We'll talk about the Battle Axes now. The Battle Axes at 8-4, not far behind as far as Dan. I guess you could say it's 130 points or so, but like you said, over a week to week basis, it's really not that big of a difference at all. And then of course you have Scavelli having the most points against, and is still gutting out these wins week to week. Putting up a good 138 last week against the Lampposts. Those are the kind of wins you need in the playoffs. And sure. I think Scavelli's team is built for that. And I think Scavelli's team is still trending upwards. I think, towards the beginning of the year with Russell Wilson and Brady lighting up a bunch of stinkers, you could say that things were a little bleak. And I think we did many times on the podcast. But I think things are trending upwards now. And, with Russell Wilson at this point is pretty much non-startable. I mean, I don't think, especially over Brady. I mean, Brady's really not lighting it up either, but I don't think you can. I think they're QB 18 and 21. I just saw, so neither one of them are really going to be the reasons they win. And I know Scavelli has been trying to upgrade that position throughout the year. Yeah. But at this point, I don't know if he can.
No, yeah, I agree, and that's unfortunately like a shocker for Scavelli. You think coming into the season, you have Brady and Russell Wilson, who's made the trade over to Denver. You're thinking, I'm going to have two top 10 guys, and I'm going to have to pick who to start every week because I don't know, who's going to have 30 and who's going to have 38. But that's really, been the opposite for him. So it's a tough break for him. And you're right. He has been gutting out those wins, and I think his team has kind of, balanced out at the right time. Earlier in the season, he had Fournette putting up big points, and now Fournette's not so great. But we have, Christian Watson nowhere, crazy, 100 points a game. But I agree, he is trending up, and he is built, I think, for the playoffs here. And that, people like Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Stephon Diggs, those are people who on any given week can win you a game. And we've seen it, happen for Scavelli several times. So I agree he's trending up, and he's in a good position, and he's had a lot of good wins despite some bad luck at that quarterback position.
Yeah, if you just look at his team, I mean, there's just the starting roster has studs. And studs will win you weeks on just by themselves. And Barkley and Henry, they go off at the right time. That's pretty much a win. And with even without these quarterbacks, you think about he's the second highest scoring team in the league without any top 10 quarterback, not even top 15 quarterback. So if one of these guys actually gets hot, if you get a Brady, hot stretch, this is a very, very dangerous team. So so let's go to the next team. In fourth place, currently, we have the Los Angeles Lambs. James's team took a loss last week to our favorite Bombers here, 151 to 129. But he's been pretty good week to week. This team, obviously the Tony Pollard deal helps a lot. You get the number 8 running back in all of fantasy right now, so that's a boost for sure. Losing Lockett might not be that important to this team right now because he's got CeeDee Lamb, who is rolling right now. He's 28 points, 12 points, 13 points. It's a little sketchy earlier in the year, but he's really settled in nicely as a top 10 receiver. And then really the only disappointing guy at this point you could say in this room is Mike Evans, who frankly just the entire Buccaneers offense is unwatchable on a week-to-week basis. It's just brutal.
Yeah, the execution, the play calling for the Bucs has just been atrocious, for almost the majority of the year. It's hard to watch. And Mike Evans is one of those guys who you expect to be, not a world beater in fantasy, but someone who you're going to rely on to have, his 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns, whatever in the season. It's just not happening this year for James, which is unfortunate. But I will say that Amari Cooper is, I think better than anybody thought he was going to be this year. And chances are, he's only going to be better with Deshaun Watson coming back. So that's, I think, looking up for James there.
Yeah, I mean, he's number 8 this year as far as wide receivers go, so he's one higher than CeeDee Lamb. And I'll tell you what, I didn't see that coming early in the year, so great pickup.
For him to be number 8 with Jacoby Brissett there is, kudos to him for accomplishing that. And, maybe he's going to be top 5 when Watson comes back. We'll see.
Yeah, and that was a trade too earlier in the year, Justin, that it
Yeah.
was Amari Cooper, Taysom Hill, and a fourth for a 23 third, a 24 second, and a 25 second. So just some mid-round picks for the number 8 wide receiver, Taysom Hill. Take it what it is, Taysom Hill, and a fourth. He basically traded it. Some middle round draft capital to pick up a number 8 receiver. It was really the reason he could make that Tyler Lockett trade and get Tony Pollard. So
Yeah.
a little bit of a domino effect here.
And we love to see former Bomber Taysom Hill having some success earlier on in the year. And I know that I believe
Number 3 tight end still.
What's that?
He's the number 3 tight end still.
I know, and I think it all came on like one game in like the beginning of the year where he had like 40 points, and I don't think James started in that game.
I don't believe so either. It looks like he made the trade on October 12th, so I don't even know if he had him on the team at that time.
Oh, okay.
But 37 points, and then the next week was 4, 9, 7, 1, 0, 6, 2. So it's that really hasn't worked out, I guess. But you never know what that 37 is going to show up. Maybe James will start him at the right time. But he has picked up Dulcich in recent weeks, who has shown some life. But the last 3 weeks he's had 1, 3, and 1. So James is still trying to figure out that tight end position.
Yeah.
Let's go to a more fun team to talk about. Not that the Lambs aren't fun, but the Muskrats are everybody. We all love to talk about the Muskrats.
Oh yeah.
145-79 victory against the lowly Cheese Fries last week. Alex has been wheeling and dealing. He's on a 2-game winning streak now. Was at 5-5. Things were looking a little shaky there for a little bit, but he's picked up a couple of wins when he needed to.
Yep. Well, Nick Chubb's been fantastic, and that's something that I think a lot of us missed on, earlier in the year. I know when you were shopping him, you and I had talks about that, and I wasn't a super believer that he would continue to improve, which has been the case, obviously. So that's a missed opportunity for me and for a bunch of, I know you were talking to other people as well, but I don't think anybody, including yourself, expected Nick Chubb to have this success for this year that he's had, and he's been tremendous all year. And he's had other players who have had, especially in recent weeks for this win streak, who have stepped up big time. T. Higgins with the Jamar Chase injury has come in and had double-digit points. Jalen Waddle's been huge this year. He's got a lot of nice pieces who can, on any given week, really make him competitive.
Yeah, I mean, with Chubb, I truly didn't expect RB3. I was expecting something more in the RB 9 to 10 range as an outcome this year, and he's literally been a lock for 15 points pretty much every week.
It's crazy.
I have him in redraft, and he's the entire reason my team is where it is right now. So great trade for him there. And then, of course, he's also had success with guys that, frankly, at the beginning of the year, I didn't really think we were going to work out that well. Travis Etienne was one of them. Obviously, he got hurt last week, but he's been pretty much a stud.
I totally agree.
I didn't really believe, and Ramondre Stevenson has really stepped up like he's wanted to. I know some people were, talking about Damian Harris, still in that backfield at the beginning of the year. That has not been the case anymore. So
he also has, that situation with Jeff Wilson, going to the Dolphins there has been hugely beneficial. So it's a great win for him there.
Absolutely. I think really, he's a 7-5 team right now, but the biggest thing that I was concerned about, he's moving all this draft capital, for these win now guys. But at the same time, if you look at this team, these are young guys. There's a lot of young players on this team. So, as long as they can sustain the success that they're having now, you look at Etienne, Waddle, Higgins, Schultz, Stevenson, Swift, and then obviously a trade for Kyler Murray as well. So, this team has some lasting power in the next couple of years. So, yes, he doesn't have any picks, and we're going to make fun of him for that anyway. But, the fact that he has guys that now have some sort of sustainability, give him some viability, even if it doesn't work out this year, which, frankly, I don't think it's going to, because I think there's some powerhouses near the top that'll take him over. He can easily make a run and, surprise everybody, similar to the Sean O'Shea-led championship run a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I agree. And while he doesn't have any picks right now, I'd be willing to bet that he's got a pick come draft day.
Oh, yeah, he's not going to be left alone. He's not going to go a whole draft without a pick. There's just no way. I believe he picked up a fourth this year, though, so you never know. He might try to sneak in there at the end, but I have a hard time believing he's going to sit out the festivities. So we'll see what happens. But let's keep moving on here to the long gamers. Now, this is a team that frankly hasn't really lived up to the early season hype. Started off really hot, but has since come down to 6-6. He's on a 2-game losing streak right now. Took down a tough loss to the Lionheads at 134-132. Yeah. That game was I wasn't really paying attention as far as how important that game was. Yeah. There was a lot on the line there because now the Lionheads are at 5-7, just behind, and they're back in it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought the Lionheads may have been out with some of the issues and injuries they've been having this year, but I think they're right back in it. But the long gamers, I think one of the biggest things that I can think of just personally for the long gamers to talk about right now is just that trade that I made with him during the draft last year, the depth trade, I call it. He gave me a first in 2024 for a bunch of guys that frankly were supposed to be depth that are not depth at all. That's Robert Woods, Kenny Golladay, Melvin Gordon, and Tyler Huntley. All those guys
this year, yeah.
All those guys have done literally nothing, and that could come back to bite them in future years. But those are supposed to be the depth guys that kept this team afloat, and that just hasn't happened. So right now, Sean's team, with Clyde Edwards-Helaire riding the pine, Jonathan Taylor seems to be picking up recently. A few weeks here, the last 3 weeks, he's had 23, 13, and 15. Beginning of the year were very questionable. So at least he's getting Jonathan Taylor rolling again. But at the beginning of the season, it was like, man, this team, this is a problem.
Early days this season, it was tough for Jonathan Taylor, and he's had a lot of trouble with Alvin Kamara, who's been really underwhelming so far this year, and another one who was opposite of Jonathan Taylor, was hot in the beginning of the year, who's kind of slowed down, is AJ Brown for him. So he's had a lot of inconsistency from these stud players that you kind of wish you don't see when you have those guys you're depending on them. And for him to not have the depth from those guys that you traded him, it kind of does hurt. And I think, he's in a similar boat to Alex in that I think he also has, you're correct that Alex does have that fourth, I think, from the trade with James we were just discussing, but I think Sean has no picks. And that's, I just feel like a dangerous place to be.
He has no picks until 2025, where he has 2 fourths. So he is in true Rams mode right now, as I call it. I'm sorry, what'd you say there?
I said he's got no picks until 2026, is what you're telling me.
That's basically what I'm telling you. Yeah. Unless you want to trade him for Samaje Perine, of course. But
I can trade him for 4th.
It's there's not a lot to look forward to, we'll put it that way, for future draft fans of the long gamers. But I guess on the positive note, we'll try to spin this a little bit here. He is getting back DeAndre Hopkins, who's been a stud since he's come back. He traded 2 seconds away for him. Yep. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown seems to be on the uptick again after being hurt earlier in the year. So there are definitely positives here. And this team is obviously a team that could still, catch some fire and make a run. There's no doubt.
He's had some very high scoring games this year. And I think it's interesting that these teams are right next to each other in the rankings, because we just talked about Alex and how he's in the win now situation, how he's got, he's kind of mortgaged his future, but frankly, he's got all these young players that could be, competitive moving forward despite having no draft picks. And Sean's in this, I think, the same boat. He's got some good young players too. I know DeAndre Hopkins is not one of them. He's old, but Amon-Ra St. Brown and AJ Brown and Jonathan Taylor and Lamar Jackson, like those are pieces for the future, all of them, and they're all great players in their own right. So I think it's interesting that they're right next to each other, because they're both in similar boats, I think.
I definitely agree. And then let's move forward here to the Lionheads. We just talked about how they had honestly probably the biggest win of their season right now, beating the Long Gamers in a very, very close battle, 134-132. This is a team that has had just so many injuries early in the year, and then
for the Lionheads,
just so many injuries, and then so many just disappointing guys. Number one, Cam Akers. Literally just supposed to be an RB2 for this team, has not even been close to that. Just lost Cooper Kupp last week, probably what looks to be the year. Javonte Williams early in the year. I believe Darren Waller pretty early in the year. I mean, you're talking about 4 to 5 starters that are just not even usable at this point, on top of, disappointments.
Yeah, correct. And the injuries are devastating, but even like you said, the disappointments, as if the injuries weren't enough, we have Aaron Rodgers playing like he in the Packers, frankly, playing like they forgot how to play football. We have, Kupp injured, and Kupp was the number one receiver last year, and like he had Debo, who was number two last year. So you come into the season thinking Kupp and Debo, the number one and two receivers, and now you don't have Kupp, who's on IR, and Debo has been, I think he's like 19 or 20 right now. He's been totally underwhelming, and so it's just that was a huge strength for him for the team last year, that receiver position, and it's just been a set of bad breaks with, like you said, Darren Waller, Cooper Kupp, Javonte Williams, Cam Akers, like all these guys who are big name players who are studs. And I have to say, they're bad beats, they're bad breaks, but he's still competing.
He's
still,
fighting.
After he beat Sean this week, it's a tough road ahead given the schedules of who they have to play moving forward. So it is somewhat of a long shot, but I think it's telling that the team is still, close. They're on the outside looking in right now, and some of these players could rebound, and some of these players are going to get healthy. Cooper Kupp's going to come back. Javonte Williams is going to come back. Darren Waller will come back at some point, despite being older. And that team could rebound, and they have 2 firsts this year in a deep
first
draft
too.
class. I believe 2 firsts. I think so.
He does, yeah.
Yeah, that's a team that is underperforming, through no fault of his this year, and I think is set for a huge bounce back next year. I think playoffs this year are it would be hard to do, still possible, but next year I think this team is, maybe going to surprise some people.
Yeah, I think playoffs this year is a nice to have situation. I don't think he's probably not expecting at this point, but I think if he pulled it off, he would be very very happy to see it. And like you said, with the 2 firsts, I believe if I look down here, he has Alex's first. So they're going to be, in the middle of the pack picks, but 2, in this draft class, 2 quality picks.
Yeah, of course.
And then just quickly to speak on the depth of the team. You're talking about a team that's, yes, they're 5-7, but look who he's playing right now, and look who's playing well. You got guys like George Pickens stepping it up. Yeah. Gus Edwards is stepping it up. Christian Kirk has been very solid this year. Guys that nobody really thought heading into the season would have any sort of real starting value. Yeah. And he needed these depth guys to be depth guys, and that's exactly what they've done. They're, you're not starting these guys unless you have to, which he does have to, but they're playing well when he needs them to. He's still dropping 134 with his top 5 guys out of the lineup. So you gotta give some golf claps here to the Lionheads for holding it together this year. But then, like you said, he's gonna have a lot of draft picks. He's got his 2 firsts this year and a second, so he still has premium draft capital, and then he has pretty much all of his picks except for thirds heading into all the way into 2025. So, like you said, I think this is a rebound team for sure next year. Just would like to see what he does at the quarterback position, because Aaron Rodgers is kind of, like you said, forgot how to play football, and then Kirk Cousins is Kirk Cousins. So I don't think we're going to see anything different from those 2 guys at this point. So he has the potential to get much better in the next year too. So I'm intrigued to see how it goes. All right, let's move forward to the Elk. The Elk, frankly, at this point, somehow are on a 3-game winning streak. I don't know how. It seems like after he made that trade to set off the soft rebuild, if you will, he's all of a sudden started winning. So he does not have his first this year. He doesn't have his second this year. And I don't believe he has a third this year. I think he only has fourth.
Yeah, it's interesting that, despite his best efforts, some might say, to lose some games, he continues to win them, because this was, before the soft rebuild, it was, a competitive team, I thought, that, had some bad weeks here, bad weeks there. I think he doesn't he have like 10 third-round picks? Isn't that his draft capital?
Yes, I'm looking at it right now. So he has his only original pick that's his. He does have his second and third from his original pick. So there is some value into losing a few games here and there at the end of the season. But he has 5 third-round picks. He has Alex's, Vince's, Dan's, James's, and his own. So he's going to pretty much own that middle of the third round unless he packages picks to move around. But at this point, it seems like, having a bunch of, dart shots would be probably better at this point than one guy. I don't think this team is one player away at all. So he has his first in 2024 and has 2 firsts in 2025. So he does have a few, but I think this team is just further ahead though, as far as, where they're at as far as a rebuilding team, when you compare it to me and Tibbs, he has guys that, you look at Chris Olave, Michael Pittman, Brian Robinson, Darnell Mooney, even though he got hurt, Pat Freiermuth, Devontae Smith. Like, he has guys that, are dynasty pieces.
Well, it's not just them, because you're right; those are great dynasty pieces. But it's his IR that's intriguing to me, where he's got Rashad Bateman, Khalil Herbert, Breece Hall. So he does have a lot of good young pieces. And obviously, it can't work this year because of all those injuries to those three key pieces I just mentioned. But next year, I think the issue with this is because it's the soft rebuild. It's kind of like the issue with it is, like, you look at your assets and you look at Tibbs's assets, and you're going to have so many, hopefully, potentially for you guys, good players who you're going to have contributing immediately or soon in this super deep 2023 draft class. And we're not going to have that here for the Elk. And he's going to have to depend on those guys who he has on his roster now, which we're seeing. Even in a down year, even in a soft rebuild, he can win some games. And when he gets those pieces back from IR, he's going to win more games. But without having that draft capital there, I don't think he has enough to be in that upper echelon of teams. I think he would be more in the range of like where Vince is this year, where he's on the outside looking in. But the difference is Vince has those draft picks.
Exactly. And to your point, we've talked so many times on this podcast about, the Elk, they have so many wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 3s. Well, without that top draft capital, you're going to get third-round picks and you're going to have second-round picks that are probably going to be wide receiver 2s and wide receiver 3s. So we might be in this exact same position in a few years. And like you said, he could be in that Lionheads, 5-7, 6-6 range again, even after a, quote, soft rebuild. So, I still think there are going to be more moves to be made for this team. I still think you're going to see a lot more movement before draft day and maybe even on draft day. So, I won't write it off yet, but, the Elk are doing with what they can with what they have at this point. So, but at this point, he needs to, just ride the wave. I think that's what this team is all about right now for the next year or two. We'll see what happens. The Cheese Fries took a quality loss here to the Muskrats. 3-9. This is exactly what the Cheese Fries probably thought heading into the year. We, a couple of wins, straggled together, a couple of wins here and there. Obviously he has, I think, 4 or 5 first-round picks this year. I think 4 probably. I think he I actually
4 seconds as well.
We haven't really discussed memes that much on the podcast, really ever. But I just wanted to point out that Tibbs posted a great meme today, and it has 8 likes, which I believe is a league high for the year. 8 likes. So I think he earned the meme of the year with that dig on Dustin's team. So kudos to you for that excellent meme. We always love to see that. And I believe, let me take a look at his draft capital, because he has a stupid amount of picks here in this year. He has
4 firsts and 3 seconds, if my memory.
4 firsts, 3 seconds, and what it looks to be is that he's going to have 7, and he has my third, so which is basically 3-1. So he's going to have, out of the top, 21 picks, he's going to have probably 7 to 8 of those. So it's going to be an interesting year if you're a draft fan for the Cheese Fries, because there's going to be a lot of fun. He is going to have quite a bit of that middle chunk of the first round too. He'll have 1-2, probably 1-3, and then 6, 5, 7, something like that. So it's gonna be a lot of fun, the draft this year for the Cheese Fries, and I think that's what he really wanted. So I'm looking forward to it.
I love the way that the Cheese Fries are doing. I love the way that you're doing it too as well, Eric. The Cheese Fries to me are a team that, they have, like you said, all those picks in this upcoming draft, which is a much lauded draft. But I think that Tibbs has done a truly tremendous job of selecting which young players he wanted to keep in this rebuild, because he sneakily, I think, has one of the best young receiving cores in the entire Dynasty League. Drake London is looking good. Garrett Wilson looks good. Jahan Dotson looked good. DJ Moore is good, but the Panthers are bad, but he's still a piece that you can play. Sky Moore has looked good. Isaiah McKenzie has looked good. Donovan Peoples-Jones has looked better than he's ever looked. And
Rashad White has looked pretty decent when he's played.
So, these receivers, he already has a stable of receivers that at that position make him competitive. obviously Patrick Mahomes is going to make him competitive at the quarterback position. Dawson Knox at tight end is a solid tight end. Then you look at running back, which is what he really truly needs to shore up. And Rachaad White has looked pretty good, and he's getting those looks now. And Tyler Algier is looking, decent at least. And so if he can hit on some running backs in this upcoming draft that can contribute soon, I think the team could be dangerous a lot quicker than people might think.
Yeah, I think with 4 first-round picks, 7 of the top 21 next year. You're going to get some definitive starters out of that group, and with the way he's drafted this year, there's no reason to believe he can't do it again. Right. So, and then not only that, he's got first all the way into 2025. So he's going to be, I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and I think he's doing it, like you said, the right way. He may have gotten a jump start on me doing it a little faster, but at the same time, also I quickly wanted to mention we talk about all these great receivers. I think there's one guy who hasn't really done much this season, but has really seen an uptick in production recently. As far as targets, it's David Bell. He took him in the third round, I believe. He's had 5 targets week 10, 5 targets week 11, 6 targets last week. Yep. He's slowly ticking up, and now he gets Deshaun Watson as his quarterback. Yep. I think there's a chance as the season closes, he might get into that. I'm trying to think of a receiver last year. There was one receiver last year towards the end of the year that kind of just broke out and then carried the success into the year after. I think David Bell is a candidate for that for sure. So, so far Tibbs' drafts from last year looks really good. So I'm a fan of what the Cheese Fries are doing.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back down to the lowly armadillos, the speed bumps. We're 1-11. We're exactly where we thought we'd be. We're grinding out each week. We're starting Dontrell Hilliard. We're starting Justin Watson. We're starting whatever receiver. You can tell us a receiver to start. We'll do it. We don't care. We'll do whatever you want. We're just here for fun. We're trying to put our best team each week, but it's been a struggle. Guys like Alec Pierce has Matt Ryan, who's got the arm of ramen noodles. I was really expecting more out of Alec Pierce, but then as soon as I saw Ryan's arm this year, I was like, yeah, that's not happening this year. The positives on this team right now are Isaiah Pacheco and Brandon Ayuk and Jalen Hurts. Those are the big 3 for us.
I disagree. I think it's more than big 3. I think Jameson Williams is up there too.
Well, yeah, he hasn't played though. He hasn't done anything.
I think in terms of the value for your team and moving forward.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting Jameson to come back in the next couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. And, anything at this point, just to show me some life. He's coming off an ACL. So I'm not expecting anything. He hasn't played football in over a year. So we'll give him all kinds of leeway. But, I'm expecting him to come back. Maybe next year we might see John Mechie come back. Wandale actually looked decent in flashes this year.
Yep.
And we're going to get Trey Lance back next year too. So, there's reasons to have some hope. And then, of course, we have lots of draft picks. Yep. I believe we have 6 in the top 20 this year, so that's a good start. And I like a couple of my lower guys like Khalil Shakir. When he's had the chances, he looked decent, and I think he'll get better as time goes on. Mecole Hardman, who I plucked off away from Alex's team, I thought he looked pretty good before he got sent to the IR. He had a couple of pretty big games for me.
He did.
So we have some pieces. We got some guys. Really, my favorite move of the whole year right now is Pacheco for a third. I really liked him coming out of the draft. He got drafted to the Chiefs. I didn't really love the landing spot. Didn't take him in the draft, but still managed to get him anyway. And he's been the starter for the Chiefs for the last couple of weeks. And I really don't think Melvin Gordon affects him at all. I've seen, people be like, oh my God, Melvin Gordon's going to take over. I think that's just a classic Chiefs depth piece. They had Le'Veon Bell at one point. They've had guys like this.
There's nothing that Melvin Gordon has done this year to make me think that he's going to walk into Kansas City and become a bell cow back or even take a substantial material number of, snap count share or whatever. I just don't. I think you're right. I think it's a depth piece. I don't think it's a big threat. I think Pacheco has looked good, and I think he's looked better in his limited time than Clyde Frog ever did. And they gave him,
he's got some burst, man. If you watch him play, he's passed the eye test.
A number of chances. So I think they're going to keep giving him those chances. I think you have a lot of really great prospective players on your team. We were talking about Tibbs, and I'm saying, he's got the Drake London and the Garrett Wilson and the Jahan Dotson. There were people who are not like world beaters now, but they're showing those flashes of brilliance. I think you have a lot of guys who are just like a rung below that, who just haven't really had a lot of opportunity to show us yet, but will be showing us next year.
I mean, even guys like Isaiah Likely are kind of in that boat too. Like when he's had his chances, he's looked pretty good. So
Yep.
I do agree. I think we're definitely not anywhere near competing. We all know that. So 6-game losing streak here. We're riding the wave. We keep picking up guys off waiver wire. We'll see what happens. But right now we are what we thought we were. So all right. So that concludes the top 10 or the standing I should say. Let's move to our next segment, and it's our final segment, and we are going to give the floor to our friend Justin Senior, and this is the state of the Bombers, and they're in first place. We talked about it a little already, 10-2. We here at league headquarters love the Bombers. We love the fact that you have lots of great young pieces. We love the fact that you have managed to hold on to your draft picks pretty much throughout the last 4 years. Obviously, last year's draft with Kyle Pitts and Ja'Marr Chase has paid massive dividends, especially not moving those picks at any point. I know there was probably a million offers to do so.
Yep.
Stood your ground, and I just wanted to say I appreciate you doing a great job for this team. Anywho, we'll cut it right there before I get too gushy. But give us a state of the union. We've talked a little bit about this on the podcast already today, but where is this team at, and where do you see it in 5 years?
It's a good question, and I'm not obviously prepared to give a State of the Union. I don't have like a note. I'm not prepared like Alex was, that time where we were doing the Alex State of the Union. But
he had days to prepare, Justin. It's okay.
Yeah, well, we are very, like I said earlier, the Bombers remember where they came from. We're feeling very fortunate to be in first place right now, and we know that with a mix of the schedule, we could just as easily be in 5th or 6th. But that being said, and I appreciate your kind words a moment ago, I feel like I'm on the same page. I feel like I have done a good job of, conserving those draft picks and hitting on at least some of them. Like we all have misses, but it was made easy for me when I had 2 and 3 last year to take Ja'Marr Chase and to take Pitts, and obviously Pitts has not panned out and he's injured now, and that's something that you have often lamented on the podcast almost on a weekly basis, and it's something that I think about before I go to bed all the time. That Kyle Pitts is not who I thought he was apparently, or the Falcons don't allow him to be who I know he is, I should say.
Yeah, it's not that we don't know who he is. We know who he is.
But, I still feel, very positively about having him moving forward. And I feel very positively about having TJ Hawkinson to pick up the slack while he's still in this, I shouldn't even say developmental, but like holding pattern process the Falcons are putting him through. And, the Chase Burrow stack is seemingly going to be fantastic for years to come. And they're good young guys that I'm excited about. I had the Chris Carson, Rashad Penny backfield, and I wanted to shore it up because I said someone's neck could snap any day here. And that's what happened with Chris Carson. And so I took my guy, Ken Walker, and that has been, a huge surprise for me. And he passes the eye test. He looks fantastic. They trust him with the ball. He's scoring points every weekend. And so we love him here in Louisiana these days. And I think, a big surprise for me has been Josh Jacobs, who is RB1 right now.
I mean, we gave you so much shit earlier in the year about Josh Jacobs. So here's your chance to rebut.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I knew all along he'd be RB1. I would not have bet on him being, RB1 through 10. But I was a believer from what I saw on film last year that he's a solid. I was feeling this is a solid RB2, a non-sexy guy that people are hating on right now that I think plays a vital role in my team. And I think he has good upside. And his upside has been far better than I anticipated, than anybody could have anticipated. And now I'm sitting on, a veritable gold mine this year with him as RB1. And if Kenneth Walker started in week 1, he'd probably be like RB3 right now or something. So,
yeah.
Coming into the season, everybody, myself included, was talking about how running back was my weak spot. And that's why I picked 3 out of my 4 picks of running backs in the draft to try to shore up that spot and get some depth there. And it's just worked out for me so far. And I've been fortunate for that. But, I think to your point of, I guess to your question of, where I see the team in 5 years, I see it still being competitive. I've had a long streak of being uncompetitive in this league. And that started from taking over the team from my friend Bryce, who left me a two-man roster of Percy Harvin and his headaches and Andrew Luck, both of whom were out of the league, relatively quickly after I took over the team. And so I really built up from nothing, and I should have been, I think, competitive sooner than I was. I think I had, was it 2 or 3 years ago where I snuck into the playoffs and made a run, but my team didn't really belong there at the time. It's taken longer than it should have, and that's partially because it took me a while to really, I think, understand the dynamic of Dynasty and what I needed to do and how I needed to continue to build the team. And then I kind of finally figured out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to approach it. And I think, part of it for me has been, as much as I would like to make more trades, I'm a very conservative trader. And I think, though, by virtue of being somewhat conservative, I've also been somewhat judicious in that. And I know everyone has a bias and tends to overvalue their own players, and we're all guilty of that from time to time. But I have liked a lot of the guys I've had for a while, and it's just finally coming together. And by being so conservative and I guess trigger shy, I've missed some great opportunities. I had talks with you earlier in the season about Nick Chubb that I just didn't pull the trigger on, which I certainly could have and should have. And I had the capital for that, and I wouldn't be missing it right now if I had Nick Chubb in the lineup. So, I miss on things like that, sometimes. But then the ones that I do have, last year I said, I don't like who I see in the third round. I want to pick up Tua and take the flyer on him, and that's worked out great for me. And Tua has been on fire this year. And, the year before I made the blockbuster with James where, I gave up, I think it was 1.3, I think it was, and I got Hollywood Brown, who's been a great player for me, and it turned into Jamar Chase, I think, was the pick I got back from James there. And so I think, I really pick my spots to make sure I'm getting what I think I'm getting from the trade. And it's worked out for me so far. And because I've done that and built through the draft that way and not really given up my picks and continue to kind of foster the younger guys, I do have a good, strong young team, and I do still have my draft picks for this year and next year. And, I think I'll just continue to build on it. And I think, I think I've said a lot of things, in the vein of understanding and recognizing, how fortunate I've been this year to have the scheduling that I've had. But at the same time, I haven't been a slouch. We're third in points. We're very close to being in second in points. And that's despite, I don't have the injuries that Vince has had, but I have had, Jamar Chase has been injured. Michael Thomas has been injured. Hollywood Brown missed several games. Cordell Patterson missed several games. Kyle Pitts has been a shithead. Kyle Pitts is on IR now. Chris Godwin missed a few games. Zeke Elliott missed a few games. Tua missed a few games. These are all people who are in my starting lineup every week, and I'm in first place. So I think it's the type of team where if I can still be winning games when those guys are on the bench, when I have on average 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players out every week, there's a lot of depth on the team. There's a lot of youth on the team. And for me to still be able to be competitive with those injuries and those issues, I think it makes me feel very positive about the future of the team, especially considering I have those draft picks.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I also, to your point, I really think the slogan of the Bombers team, over the last, 3 to 4 years at least, is patience pays. Because I think some of these guys, like we talked about, they've been in trade discussions. I've talked to you about Kyle Pitts trade discussions. I talked to you about Hawkinson. Now that Pitts is hurt, having Hawkinson and being a little, quote, stingy, with some of these players has really helped the depth of the team. Being patient on Tua, being one of the first guys to really be patient on Tua. I was not patient with Tua, and you are reaping the benefits now. Being a little more patient with guys like Cordero Patterson, perhaps, even guys not moving him. It was probably very easy to move Cordero after last year and, cash in on the success last year. He's been pretty good this year too. And then of course, guys like Josh Jacobs, even Ezekiel Elliott, he's kind of rebounded a little bit this year as well, as far as, his overall production. He's at least doing something for you. I think a lot of these guys, and even some of these guys on your bench too, I think a perfect example of being patient is going to be a guy like Deontay Johnson. Maybe his situation changes, in the next year or so, but he's still a quality player. And there's going to be guys moving forward that some of these depth guys, Michael Gallup, Marquise Hollywood Brown, maybe not doing so hot right now, but I think the patience pays aspect has saved you your draft picks. I think it's basically given you the opportunities, like you said, to get guys like Ja'Marr Chase and not be willing to move off of stuff so fast. You could people around the league could say, oh, Justin's tough to trade with, or Justin is a little stingier with his picks. But at the end of the day, you're making the right moves with the moves that you have made. I think that all of those have paid off in terms of you not selling short of what you have, and everybody overvalues their players a little bit at times, and that's just the nature of the game. But with this team, if you aren't patient with a few of these players, this is a completely different team. And I think all those moves have really just kind of come to a head at this point. So I'm a big fan of the Bombers, obviously, and I've followed this team for years. Everybody already knows that. But I think if you really look closer at this roster and look at it from top to bottom, these are guys that have stuck around a while. Not a lot of these guys are fresh faces. They're guys that you've seen for a while. The Zekes, the Jacobs, the Hollywood Browns. Like these guys have been around a while, and it's just now turning into something special because of this influx of youth with the Chases, with the Pitts. Even though Pitts hasn't done shit, I still think he's going to be one of the blue chip guys moving forward. Joe Burrow's been great. Tua's been great. And then you still have a few guys on the bench too that have upside with Kenny Pickett, and there's guys out there. So, and you have your picks this year, and you have your picks next year, and the year after that. So it's a nice, steady approach to the dynasty game that we play, and with so many other people doing the exact opposite of what you're doing, where it's Alex moving shit around every day, where it's Sean, investing everything he has draft capital wise. It's me and Tibbs going the complete other way from that. It's the Bombers are, I hate to say it, the most boring team in the league, but it's not the on-field production that's boring. It's just you might be the Green Bay Packers perhaps as far as your capital management and roster management, where everybody expects, oh, let's go get something this year. Let's go do something with these draft picks. Let's get that receiver for Aaron Rodgers. Let's do that. Now let's just play it steady, and still basically until this year they made the playoffs every year, and it seems to work out. And I think just now we're starting to see all these guys and being patient really work out. And I think, like you said, this team is really set up for the next 3 to 4 years. So I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks. And sometimes it is a mistake, and I do miss opportunities because of that conservative nature. And it's I'm always looking, and I wanted so badly, even before you guys talked about it on one of the earlier podcasts. I was talking to Vince about this the other day, that I was looking to shop TJ Hawkinson earlier in the year and try to swap him for a running back straight up to fill that running back depth and bank on Kyle Pitts. And one of the trades I was looking at was a straight up Hawkinson for David Montgomery, which I thought would be fair value, that I didn't even end up sending before the season started, because I was frankly too afraid. I was like, Kyle Pitts had 1 touchdown this year. The Falcons are so bad. What if he does it again to me? And TJ Hawkinson, I think, was tight end 5 last year. And so I was like, why would I give up my safety blanket of TJ Hawkinson when, if something goes terribly wrong with Kyle Pitts, which it has verifiably, certifiably gone horribly wrong. And TJ Hawkinson has been like steady Eddie at the tight end position, and I'm very glad that I didn't trade him away. I understand that that's, hindsight's 2020. I just happened to make the right call on this one. But that's kind of, it just speaks to, I think, the conservative approach that I take, and that I guess it can be boring, especially compared to, the 2 extremes of the league of, selling everything for assets to rebuild, or selling all the, draft capital for win now players. But I think it's finally allowed me to be in a position to have a strong team. It's just taken a lot longer than I think it should have, because I didn't realize earlier on what the best strategy would be. I allowed myself to kind of be in that muck and not take steps to either buy players to move forward or sell players to rebuild. And I just allowed myself to linger in that space for too long. And it, led my team to be a bottom half team for kind of regularly. But that allowed me to, get those higher picks, which is why we have that reverse order. And, I've made good use of the picks, and I've made good use of the few trades that I have done. And it's just kind of, I think, set me up very well now.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point with Kyle Pitts, you know, kind of dumping you and having that backup safety in another league, that another dynasty league, I have Kyle Pitts, and you know, I went pretty much all in on Kyle Pitts and really didn't have a depth guy. I didn't have you know, a Dalton Schultz or you know, a Dawson Knox even, or anybody like that that's even usable. So right now I have to go to the waiver wire and find Austin Hoopers and shit because I didn't play it that way when I probably should have. I actually traded away Zach Ertz earlier in the year, and then another quality decent depth tight end. I can't remember right now, but so like those are the moves that, you know, I'm pretty much out of the playoffs in that league because of that move. So you know, I think that's a pretty good example of what could happen if you don't play it the way you did. So yeah, I think we all know that the Bombers are contending this year. I think we have now heard from the GM himself on where the team stands. I think this is going to be one of the more fun teams to watch now. You know, maybe boring, you know, it is a word for the off seasons perhaps, but you know, this is a team that's not going to be boring for the next 5 years. I mean, if you look at this team, it's pretty loaded up. So I'm excited for the Bombers. I'm excited, and hopefully they win me Dynabook money. That's really what I'm all about at this point because I have nothing to root for. So I'm a full-blown Bombers fan at this point. So I'm going to buy some merch as well soon. We have to get you that quarter zip too. We haven't talked about that. We will get you that quarter zip. Maybe if you win the league, that'll be my my gift from the commissioner. I'll get you that. We'll see. All right, so that about wraps up today's podcast. We are just about at an hour, so that's perfect timing. I just want to give a quick shout out to my co-host who isn't with us tonight. He is celebrating the birth of his first child, so Sean O'Shea, Daddy O'Shea, I should say. He's fighting for the playoffs, but he at least he'll have a little buddy to do it with now, so that's pretty cool. And Justin, I want to thank you again for hopping on short notice, giving us a little State of the Union and some insight on the rest of the league. And I think we'll wrap it up here. So Justin, thanks again.
Happy to be here.
All right, we'll see you all for episode 39, probably close to the end of the season. And I'm excited to see who wins this one. This is an interesting muck this year. I think once the playoffs start, it really could be anybody's game to win. So we'll see next time.